Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Qatar Critical Care Conference 2019. My name is Claire Selwood, and this evening I'll be your facilitator for this opening ceremony. On behalf of Dr. Ibrahim Fawzi, Director for Critical Care, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the very beautiful and impressive Doha in Qatar. Moving on with proceedings, please can I invite Mr. Ma Godar to the stage to read from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام.
Can I please welcome our next guest to the stage, Dr. Ibrahim Fawzi. Dr. Ibrahim is the Director for Critical Care and ECMO Programme for Hamed Medical Corporation and the Chairman of the South and West Asia chapter of ELSO.
Thank you, Claire, for the introduction. Dear Your Excellency, honored guests, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen, this is a special day for us to celebrate. It's 40 years since the opening of the first intensive care unit in Qatar. 40 years. We're here to celebrate a success made of our colleagues before us, who made us what we are and where are we now. It's a great privilege to have all of you here. We invited a lot of people from different places, and we really appreciate your coming all the way from all over the world. We have about 860 people joining us in our conference from 24 different countries. And this is a really something we value. You know, you're coming all the way to celebrate with us. We value the family who are actually with us here today in the opening ceremony of patients who survive a cardiac arrest and survive multiple organ dysfunction syndrome and their families. It's a great pleasure for me to present critical care and to open the ceremony of Qatar Critical Care Conference. In today's ceremony also we'll recognize some of the key people who made a difference in the life of people in Qatar by improving critical care services. And we'll know more about Qatar critical care history that I learned so much about it actually in the last 3 months. Just digging in, trying to understand more and know, and great deal of knowledge. So we spent a successful 2 days, very successful 2 days. Pre-conference workshop, 11, a pre-conference workshop that's from just a simple didactic lecture to immerse simulation in all different type of critical care pathologies, for adults, for pediatrics, for neonates. And I really thank all the course director, or the scientific committee, the organizing committee for the outstanding work that you guys made to have a very successful first pre-conference workshop. Moving forward in the conference, we'll have another very interesting and entertaining program that was put by different group in critical care, whether in Qatar or internationally, that cover a variety of track for adult, pediatrics, and neonate. And it's beautiful to see all the hospitals in Qatar presented in this meeting. And I again thank all the speakers who came from different places, all the delegates who joined us today, and all the organization team who done a fantastic work to make this conference successful. I cannot thank enough also our sponsors who really help us to deliver such a fantastic venue. And it's very important for us to thank them for all the support that they help us with that. And it's a partnership, you know, we exchange knowledge. You know, it's a great opportunity for us not just to celebrate, but to learn. Huge opportunity for learning. And I see Professor Jean-Louis Vincent. You are welcome here, please. It's a pleasure to have you, so definitely, please come in. Welcome. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn from each other. We have people coming from Middle East, people coming from North America, from South America, from Europe, from Asia and Africa, and from every single hospital in Qatar. A great opportunity for us to learn and celebrate our success. With that, I would like to welcome you all to Doha, to Qatar Critical Care Conference. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure and enjoy. Don't forget your time in Qatar. It's a lot of entertainment that you can see. Enjoy the city. The weather is great. Hopefully it's going to get even better. Thank you very much.
To deliver our keynote speech tonight is a gentleman who needs no introduction at all. He is the Associate Medical Director and Consultative Intensivist at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust, London, and Professor of Intensive Care Medicine in King's College London. He is also leader of the clinical academic group within King's Health Partners that includes critical care and respiratory medicine, co-chair KHP Informatics and part of the KHP executive. He is the past chair of the Research Committee of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine and has been their representative on the steering committee of the Surviving Sepsis campaign since 2004. Please, would you all join me in welcoming Professor Richard Beale to the stage.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's a great honor to be here, and Your Excellencies, friends, everyone else, thank you for this wonderful invitation. Now, when I was asked to give this talk, I thought for a little while about what I would say. I could reflect on my time in intensive care, but many of the meetings that I've attended and where I've been part of the organization, we've always felt it was very important to remind ourselves, especially those of us working full-time in intensive care, how our speciality sits within the broader health continuum. Because we don't operate in isolation. We operate as part of a much broader health continuum. And our patients have existences before and we hope after their time with us. And these days, thinking about how that works is absolutely crucial to how we position ourselves for intensive care delivery itself. So, a little bit about King's Health Partners, where I come from. It's one of the academic health science centres in London. It has, well, it's a big setup, as you can see. We have 4.8 million patient contacts a year. We cover a population of 8 million in southeast London. And we do all sorts of things. We have all the major specialities, and we do a lot of research. We are one of 6 academic health science centres. We're comprised of Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital, forgive me while I get the hang of this, Guy's and St. Thomas's, where I work, King's College Hospital, and very importantly, South London and the Maudsley, which is the leading mental health institution in Europe, and one of the 2 most highly cited from a research point of view in the world. And our university is King's College London. We have 40,000 staff and 30,000 students. And our mission, of course, is a very broad one, to try and improve the health and well-being of the population we serve. Creating a value-based culture is a key element of this. And one of the things that we've done is stolen an idea from the Cleveland Clinic. There, each department produces a report, if you like, of what it's doing, a benchmarking exercise to understand where it is, what its ambitions are, what it's achieved, and what it seeks to achieve in the future. And we're doing the same. We call them outcomes books, and you can see a number of them. The exercise isn't complete. The one for my own department is almost finished. A lot of work's gone into it. But it's an important way of establishing exactly what you do, where you are, and being proud of what you've achieved, but setting proper goals for the future and understanding where you need to improve. And this brings me on to the thing that I want to focus on today, which is this concept of value and placing ourselves properly within the broader health system. Now, this is the standard definition of value in healthcare. So the outcomes that matter to patients, service users, and carers, divided by the costs of achieving these resources over the complete pathway. But the NHS has slightly modified this because we believe that the term resources is a better one for this. Because although costs are important and money can be a most important metric for understanding how a system works, in fact, the resources go much more broadly, don't they? We, as healthcare professionals, are part of the resourcing. So are all the other people who work in the healthcare pathway. You could even regard families and carers in the broader sense as being part of the resources that a society brings to bear to deliver care over a complete pathway. And so this equitable and sustainable and transparent use of the available resources is a key element of what we believe is important in defining value. Now, creating a value culture requires teamwork. And you've already those people who've been to the preliminary courses here seen some great examples of teamwork, some of the courses and the work that's gone around ECMO and other areas. Brilliant examples of how teams can come together and really start to deliver value. This is an example in my own area. This is a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Iram Patel, and she's a senior respiratory physician, and she's led this multi-professional team who've really focused on trying to improve outcomes, in this case, with COPD. And here you can see some of the team members. And they, at King's College Hospital, have achieved this really very impressive reduction in length of stay and in admissions and readmissions over time with this community-based approach to managing patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. By training caregivers in the community, by providing point-of-care technology in a smart way, by starting to use data intelligently to drive down some of the morbidities that these patients have and to improve outcomes. And so when I was looking to give this talk and building on my many visits to Qatar, where I've been lucky enough to make many friends and learn something of the system, and also I've been privileged to look after many Qatari patients back in London, then naturally I came across this document. And it's a fascinating document, of course, under the sponsorship of His Highness and the leadership of Her Excellency Dr. Hanan, who unfortunately, I understand, can't join us this evening. But many of the things that are in this document resonate absolutely with what we're trying to do in our system. Indeed, King's Health Partners is 10 years old, and it's up for reaccreditation in our system. We have to apply again to be accredited by our government. They don't give us any money, mind you, but it is a privilege to be accredited. And so we're designing our strategy. What do we do going forwards? And of course, there's our biomedical research, there's our informatics program, there's our discovery program for new molecules to try and make improvements in a number of cutting-edge areas of medicine. But there's also our place nested both locally and more globally in what we do to try and deliver better value and better care for our population. And key elements within that are reflected as well in this document. And a couple of things that particularly resonated for me. One is mental health. We, as I'll touch on in a minute, have a program that we're extremely proud of, which we call Mind and Body, because it's clearly completely wrong and artificial to separate our mental and physical health. We all know from our personal experience that when things are going badly for us, we may feel less well, and when we feel unwell, we often feel down. Another element of it that resonates with our own plans is the ambition that all of us, as healthcare professionals, as the workforce, if you like, are also part of a group that we have responsibility for. If you think back to those numbers I showed you at the beginning about the numbers of our students, the numbers of our workforce, we are the largest employer and the biggest single economic entity in Southeast London. And so being mindful of how we look after our staff, and if we're going to try and improve population health, we include our own staff, is absolutely key. And I noticed a similar point made in this document as well. One of the problems we all wrestle with, and is a real issue for the patients we treat in intensive care, is this. It's this issue of chronic health. And these numbers here, although not exactly the same as the ones that I will show you in a minute for Southeast London, resonate very much. And this is the pattern in all advanced societies, and it's the problem that all advanced healthcare systems are having to deal with. So we have 69% in Qatar of mortalities occurring from chronic conditions, particularly cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. And I was talking to our own chief of oncology just last week. We were looking at sort of cancer strategy. And he was telling me that in first world countries now, 1 in 2 of us can expect to suffer from cancer at some point in our lives. It's a pretty shocking statistic, but of course it's associated with living longer, but also with the increasing burden of chronic health. The obesity issue is a problem we're struggling with as well. Lack of exercise, problems with child health, injury. In this country, I'm aware that there's a real problem with road traffic accidents and trauma. If you go to our trauma unit at King's College Hospital, you'd see less of that, but we have an epidemic of violent crime and knife crime amongst our young people, which is a tragedy, and which we're starting to approach almost as if it were a disease to try and find health strategies to deal with it rather than criminal-based strategies. But we don't have a solution at the moment. And then, of course, smoking, which is a problem everywhere. And so the strategy has these elements to it, which are exactly the same things as you would find in the draft strategy we're writing in King's Health Partners. Moving from disease focus to population health, from acute and episodic care to integrated care, with primary care being the most important thing. Rather than healthcare costs being seen as a financial burden, health is an investment in the future. A healthy population, a healthy society is going to be a much more productive and a much happier society. And this too, none of us anymore can really get away with the idea that we're passive recipients of healthcare and that we have no personal responsibility for our health. And so moving to empowerment, individuals taking control, being part of the solution, but also sharing the responsibility is a key element of what we need to do. This is the definition that we use for health inequality, which is a key element of this problem. You can see that it's the unfair and avoidable difference in people's health across groups and between populations. And it's unfair because these health inequalities do not occur by random chance, but by circumstances, and they're often rooted in political and social decisions. If we think about the problems occurring not so far from here, in Syria, for instance, then the enormous health inequalities that flow from a refugee crisis that arise from a conflict environment do ultimately arise from what are political consequences. But rather than just being at that macro level, it can also be at a micro level, the way a society chooses to resource its healthcare system and its social care system. Now, if you look in England at life expectancy, and if you divide, I'm afraid the pointer's not working as well as I'd wish, but if you divide along the bottom here by deciles of deprivation, where on this side we have the most deprived and this side we have the least deprived, you can see visually very easily that life expectancy, whether you're a man or a woman, increases where you're less deprived. Not a surprise. And life expectancy generally, over time, has been improving. Until very recently, at least for the UK. And this is also a phenomenon that's been seen in other advanced countries, and people debate very much what the reason for this might be. To some extent, it depends on where you sit on the political spectrum. But of course, two big factors here are the financial slowdown of the last few years, the austerity measures that societies have had to put in place to deal with that, and then other large events that are completely unrelated, such as influenza epidemics. And so there are a number of factors that probably play into this that are not fully understood, but it is a worry that trend of improvement has now largely, for the moment at least, stopped. This graph shows a much longer trend over time, really going back 150 years for Scotland. And it's part of a larger study contrasting Scotland with other countries, because Scotland has the lowest life expectancy in the United Kingdom. And again, you can see quite an up and down pattern over time, including big jumps here, which are after periods where there's been a big fall. So this follows the Second World War. But once again, we see this reduction in modern times in the improvement, which is a concern. And again, if you relate this to deprivation deciles, again with the most deprived on the far left-hand side and the most well-off on the right, then you can see that the effect is worst in those who are most deprived. Now, of course, national numbers are very important, and they give you a sense of what's going on more broadly. But if you're going to do anything about this, you need to drill down. Now, we're fortunate because we have good data for this sort of thing in the UK, and this speaks to the importance of data and being able to extract it and to use it. And health informatics is another key element of trying to underpin any health system improvement. These are all the London boroughs, the political entities within London that each has a local council. And the green ones at the top here are, of course, names that some of you will recognize. They're the wealthiest. And you can see that life expectancy worsens as you go to the poorer areas of London. The ones with the black bars, they're our boroughs. They're the areas we cover in South London. Bromley and Bexley are both wealthy areas on the outskirts of South London. Leafy, large houses, commuter belts, stockbrokers, that sort of place. Lambeth and Southwark, where our hospitals are, these are amongst the most deprived boroughs in the UK. And that's where many of our challenges are. And when you look at the differences in life expectancy between the least and most deprived areas, then you can see, not surprisingly, that these places on the left there in Bexley and Bromley do best. And when you look at ward level, and this is where the data start to get very, very powerful if you're looking to try and drive local initiatives, when you get not just at the level of a local council, but you get to the level where a local politician is elected, small areas of your population, the local councillor for Camberwell or Peckham or wherever it happens to be, and you can plot out life expectancy with this degree of detail, then you're starting to get to a level where you can potentially intervene with public health initiatives. And at this level, we're also able to profile blood pressure, we're able to profile compliance with various medications, and the rest. Here are infant mortality data by deprivation, and again, you can see that over time, for all levels of deprivation, we have seen improvements in infant mortality until, once more, this last period, this period of perhaps austerity, perhaps there's something else going on, but it does strike you that something has changed and that it isn't fully understood yet. We can look at maternal mortality, and we can break it down by ethnicity, which may be related to economic status. In the UK, for many years, we've had a confidential inquiry into maternal deaths, whereby every maternal mortality and serious morbidity is individually investigated and lessons learned. And that provides us with a very rich data source to get these sorts of insights. And this, I think, is one of the most striking statistics of all, which is one that may not be familiar to you. So this shows the excess mortality rate for patients under 75 in patients with serious mental illness. It's expressed for our various boroughs, but the key thing to note is the scale here. This is the percentage excess mortality. So there is a very, very substantial excess mortality rate associated merely with being mentally ill. And patients with mental disease don't die from suicide. They die from physical illness that's been poorly treated. And when you think that psychiatrists tell us that maybe 30% of us will at some point during our lives struggle with mental health issues. And that post-traumatic stress, for instance, is a major consequence of serious critical illness, that patients who've survived multi-organ failure have something like a 30% rate of depression. There's a significant depression rate in their partners. They struggle to go back to work. They struggle to gain employment if they were previously unemployed, and the economic consequences of the wider family may be substantial. It's no wonder that these burdens exist, and we have to recognize them if we're going to deal with them effectively. And another thing to bear in mind, again expressed by health inequality deciles, is this concept of the period of your life that you live where you are healthy, in the light green here, and then the period where you are living with chronic illness. And again, of course, the picture is better if you are less deprived. But for all of us in modern society, we can expect a period of our lives where we will live with chronic ill health. And so trying to minimize that and manage it is a key element that we need to address. And of course, when we think of the patients we see in the critical care units, today, so many of them are there with comorbidities, which makes managing them difficult, and many of those comorbidities are the reasons they've been admitted in the first place. This is another way of looking at it, but it really does give you a sense there of the way being more deprived, being more vulnerable, almost condemns you to such a substantial period of your life where you will be living with chronic ill health. And of course, in the boroughs where people are more wealthy, but there are still people who are not wealthy, then that difference is exacerbated. Now, these things have all taken their place in these two important documents as far as the British Health Service is concerned, our long-term plan and the Chief Medical Officer's report. And these drive the strategy for how we address these things at a national level. But they have some key elements within them that are helpful. And again, they resonate very much with the aspirations and the plans in the Qatari document as well. And I think, therefore, we must all be roughly on the right track. This is a prediction of out to 2035 of the burden of people aged 65 or over living with multimorbidity, from no morbidities at the bottom right the way up to 4 or more comorbidities. And you can see that this will create a most enormous burden on our health systems. Now, how can we address this? Well, what we have done is we've come up with something that on the one hand is pretty simple. It's a statement of the obvious, but we're pushing it hard, and it's become a key focus of our strategy. And it's been adopted nationally as well. And this is the work, really, of my close friend and senior colleague, Professor John Moxham, who's an eminent respiratory physician, respiratory physiologist of the first order, but also director of strategy at King's Health Partners, shortly to retire after a long and illustrious career. And he came up with these things, which are obvious, aren't they? Blood pressure, obesity, mental health, smoking status, and not a problem here so much, but at home alcohol intake. And these he has termed, the vital 5. Now, determinants of health and those vital 5 elements are dependent on all these different elements here, and health services are only a relatively small amount. We've talked about some of these other things already, and some of them are things that we can't do anything about, although those of us who set policy clearly are in a position to influence. Nevertheless, when you look at that vital 5 and look at these things, these are the 4 that are not mental health, you can see their effect in terms of driving deaths per 100,000 in our local area. So smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes,
obesity, alcohol are the predominant drivers of risk of death in our part of London and, frankly, pretty much everywhere. This is also interesting. This is disability-adjusted life years, which is a way of looking at the burden of disease. And on the left-hand side here, you have the picture in 1990. And on the right, 2017. And the thing that these dark green boxes are to draw your attention to is the change in depressive disorders. So depressive disorders was here, heart disease and all the rest at the top. But look how in this time period, the burden of disability associated with depression has moved up the league table in that 17-year period. And what about anxiety disorders? The same thing, all the way up. So mental health is a key determinant of physical health and our societal wellness. Now, the thing about the Vital Five, and the reason that we think it's so important, is you can actually do something about it if you put the right effort and the right initiative into place. And those things are not complicated. I mean, blood pressure does all those good things. Well, what do? The first thing you do is you measure blood pressure. Obesity, weigh people. Mental health, a bit more difficult, but you have to assess people. You have to be unafraid of recognizing the issue, and you have to be willing to ask the questions. And alcohol and smoking, you start by documenting what people are actually doing. Difficult, they don't always want to tell you. If my doctor asks me how much I drink every week, I always say slightly less than the truth. But nevertheless, you start the process. And smoking, in the UK, you can see, we've made a lot of progress in that dark orange line in terms of reducing the incidence. And there is still, though, a societal profile to where smoking is more common. This goes back to the mental health question again. What this graph shows you is the average reduced life expectancy on the left-hand side here for men and women, schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, and depression and anxiety. So men with schizophrenia have an average reduced life expectancy of 14.6 years. That makes this condition as lethal as pretty much anything. And as I said to you before, they're not dying from suicide. They're dying from physical ill health that has been poorly recognized and treated, and of course their disease means that it's difficult for them to comply with treatment. You'll notice there that smoking is extremely high in all these groups. So there's a lot to be done. That's Professor Moxham in the middle, campaigning against smoking as a good chest doctor would. But by starting this process of smoking assessments, you can see there that we have been able to improve the pickup and the delivery of our smoking assessment tools across every patient contact we have in our hospitals. And we've adopted the Ottawa model of smoking cessation, which works and is pretty straightforward, but by focusing on the problem, and we're commissioning it across the board at our two main acute hospitals. Alcohol. Well, again, alcohol deaths are once more prevalent in those who are more deprived. And again, by launching the same sort of process, we're beginning to make an impact on assessing patients' alcohol risks across our hospitals. And we have special alcohol teams in the community and in the hospital. And we've done some health economics modeling on this, and you'll see the return is really very good. In the middle there, we estimate for our in-hospital teams that the return on investment in terms of health improvement is nearly £4 for every pound we spend. Well worth doing, well worth that initial investment. And here's one of our teams winning the Mental Health Team of the Year at the BMJ Awards this year. Obesity, another major problem. The picture's perhaps slightly different in the UK than one or two other places. For us, the obesity problem is more in our most deprived. But it's a major issue, and we're seeing more and more childhood obesity that we really need to address. And of course, what have you got to do about it? Well, you've got to weigh people. You've got to focus on it. There should be weight done every time the opportunity arises, and it should be chartered, and children in particular should be referred to weight management services. Obesity has increased threefold. It affects 2 billion adults, and we need to start to address it differently. This isn't a fashion issue. Like any chronic illness or condition, this needs to be treated with understanding, support, and without stigma. And crucially, even small amounts of weight loss make an enormous amount of difference to people's health. This is another of our programs of which we're very proud, IMPARTS, integrating mental and physical health care, research, training, and services. And essentially what we do is we recognize that depression is common in patients with physical illness. 23% of rheumatology patients. Anxiety, 21% of orthopedic patients. Those patients are going to cooperate with, comply with their treatments much less well than someone else would, merely because they're worried. They may not take their medicines, they may not attend appointments. So now we have clinics running, or a system running, where when patients attend any of these physical health clinics, and we're expanding all the time, they also have structured mental health questionnaires done by those physical clinic staff who've been trained in how to address this problem, so that we can start to provide support for patients who need it. Blood pressure. I wonder what would be the answer if I asked you here now to put your hands up. Do you know your blood pressure? Excellent. Very good. Go on, hands up. That's good. That's good. Because if we don't know it, we can't measure it. These are some data from, again, using our health informatics tools where we can analyze the local primary healthcare record. In our local borough of Lambeth, we know that 20% of the population has hypertension. That means 60,000 people. But only half of them are regularly known to their family doctors. And only half of those, so just 15,000 of the 60,000, have their blood pressure well controlled. So 3/4 of them are not being managed, and yet it's easy to do, it's an easy measurement to make, the drugs are available and effective, and they work. And in Southwark, we reckon that if we could reduce blood pressure by 10 millimeters of mercury, we could have all these benefits. Fewer patients with heart disease, fewer with heart failure, fewer strokes, and fewer deaths. So this is our vision of the Vital Five. These are the key components, obvious and simple things, but actually potentially enormously powerful if we do them. The key thing, though, is they must cross the whole of our working, and well, not just our working lives, our whole lives. Now, you may say, that's all very interesting. What's this got to do with intensive care? Well, as I said at the beginning, intensive care sits in this broader continuum, so we can't neglect and avoid our responsibilities. But a key element of this is taking personal responsibility. We've touched on, do we know our own blood pressures? The next thing, though, is we're all healthcare professionals. We all have contact with citizens, patients, our families. We can take responsibility there as well for starting to lead by example, starting to educate, start to help, start to try and pass this message out. But we do need a system that enables and empowers us to do this. So there has to be education, there has to be follow-up. In the critical care context, our own now very successful follow-up clinics are bringing all these elements of the Vital Five to bear in the follow-ups we do for patients who've survived critical illness. But of course, if this were done effectively, it's quite likely that quite a few of these patients wouldn't end up in the ICU in the first place, which is a prize worth having. So whether it's ourselves, our families, the people with whom we work, the workforce in the organizations of which we're all part, or whether it's taking the opportunity in a structured and focused way to pass on these messages and to help educate our patients every time we see them in an appropriate fashion, in a healthcare system where, as a matter of policy, leadership are empowering education and awareness of these messages. And then if we do this, perhaps we can move things forwards. Of course, it's a big challenge, but I think it's the most crucial one that faces us, and it illustrates to you the power of what can be done by doing simple things properly and using data sensibly, rather than necessarily always focusing on the most advanced things. This is the network that we have where I am. It will be different here in Qatar, but the principles of what I've said apply just as much here as they do at home, and indeed pretty much everywhere. The challenge for you, perhaps, would be to think, what does your diagram look like? What are the bodies and the contributors and the organizations that contribute here? Where are the gaps? What needs to be developed to try and enable this program to go forwards? And how does it fit with the very promising strategy that the Ministry of Public Health has set out? But of course, at its heart are the people, because you can't do this to people. You have to do it with people. And we have to remember that we are people too in this context. So my good friend John Moxham always finishes with this. He says, keep on keeping on. He knows this is difficult. It's a long journey. We'll never be finished. So keep on keeping on. But what I hope I've shown you is that it's possible to use data sensibly to do this, and that by doing these simple things sensibly, which is what I like to think we have started to do, you really can start to make a difference. You can move this forwards. And is it relevant to critical care? Of course it is, for all the reasons I've alluded to. But most fundamentally, we are healthcare professionals nested in a broader system. You'll hear many, many exciting things about high technology medicine in the next few days. But it's important to remember where we sit and where our responsibilities lie more broadly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Beale, for, as always, an insightful and thoroughly interesting keynote speech. Please can I welcome our next guest to the stage, Dr. Ibrahim Fawzi, to talk on the history of the critical care in Qatar. Dr. Ibrahim.
This will be really, it took us some time to review that because it's not written really anywhere, so we have to dig in, ask our colleagues, our senior people who, when we look to the dates, I was not born at that time, so I have to review really everything, and I think we have to publish that eventually because it's important for the history. This is not my talk. Can we please switch to my presentation? Okay, no conflict of interest to this presentation. So we will review briefly the development of critical care in Qatar, how this started, how it progressed. We recognize some key contribution to improve critical care in Qatar, and really the fantastic progress that made over 40 years. And looking to the future, where should we go in the next steps? So Qatar, for people who visited Qatar for the first time in the Middle East, in the Gulf region, this is the landscape of Corniche that you definitely need to have a walk and enjoy. We are hosting the World Cup in 2022. We are all looking forward to that. It's going to transform, already transform our infrastructure. Some of you already came on Qatar Airways. We are very proud of our Qatar Airways. And this is obviously some of the real thing that you remember about Qatar. Jazeera being sport for people who love football. I'm a big fan of football. Some of the attraction that you need to visit just for our guests who first time to come to Qatar. That's a new museum, National Qatar Museum, Museum of Islamic Art. Some of you already done the safari ride, so that is very entertaining. Don't get scared. So Qatar, not only about that, but this is a real transformation, educational city that you really need to visit. You have the Weill Cornell Medical College. You have Carnegie Mellon, Georgetown University, Texas A&M, and so many other universities. I wish I had these schools when I finished my high school. I have to go abroad to study, but now this is available for our children and for the people in the region. So if you go back to by history, 1980, the population of Qatar was about 200,000. That's the population of Qatar. And this was the first intensive care unit that was built by Dr. Hajar, who was past Minister of Health for us, a cardiologist who established the first critical care unit in the country. And Dr. Abdul Hafiz, who's with us here, he's actually the one who eventually led the critical care development, considered by many to be the godfather for critical care. So he trained so many generations of intensivists who actually trained other generation and continue to evolve. This is in 1983. That was the first surgical ICU. And this some of the establishment that has been made, open heart surgery, TPN, percutaneous tracheostomies, and other development led by Dr. Hafiz and the team of the surgical ICU. And I digged in deep and I found that that was the first Gulf conference on intensive care. That's actually in 1991 when I graduated from my high school. That was shared by Dr. Hafiz, and they discussed very important concept of neurological criteria and organ donation that eventually led to the organ transplant, and a merit degree was issued in 1997. Very important conference. So when you look at the surgical ICU, from 1979, a little bit more, 83, all the way to 2013, Dr. Abdul Hafiz and his team led really the development of critical care. And it also gave the birth of the trauma ICU. CT ICU was part of it initially, and the burn ICU. And in 2011, Dr. Faisal actually joined. We're continue to evolve the surgical ICU, expanding to multiple sites. Transplant program now we're heavily. The Roval model of care for outreach nurses also was developed. Trauma ICU, initially established in 1997. Dr. Hafiz's team as well. And in 2008 was an important point for us. Trauma is the most common cause of death in a young adult in Qatar. And in 2008 was a big review of trauma service, University of Pittsburgh, and Dr. Kimberly Moll, who was the first one who actually established the trauma intensive care unit, followed by our colleague, Dr. Ashok, Dr. Rubin, Dr. Zarour, and currently Dr. Talat continue to carry this burden. The CCU, considered to be the first intensive care unit that's open in Qatar, it was only 2-bed. That was the 2-bedded ICU here. And we fortunately to get this picture from Dr. Amir Sheikhouni, who took it from Dr. Hajar as well. That was the first ICU. But the CCU will not go without the mention of Dr. Abdul Razzaq Jihani, really, who spent from 1990 to 2014, established the modern intensive care of the cardiac care unit with a PCI, with lots of advancement in the CCU that continue to evolve. And lots of leaders came afterward, Dr. Awad, Dr. Ashfaq, Dr. Mawahib, who's currently leading the CCU development. CTICU started as a part of surgical ICU. In 1987 was the first surgery. But the real development of the CTICU really started with the New Heart Hospital development. And, Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Khalifi, obviously, with established, what's wrong with, mechanical circuitry support that gave us a room. In the past, with a cardiac arrest or LV dysfunction, you lose. We don't have heart transplant. So this was a key in the history, is establishing really the mechanical circuit support by Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Khalifi team that really helped us a lot to do the ECMO program and the MCS as well. The lead of that unit was Alejandro Kuhn and Dr. Abdurrashid and all the fantastic cardiac anesthesia that continue really to do high-level cardiac surgery, supporting the critical care. Medical intensive care unit opened in 1980, and it was actually an open ICU until Dr. Awad Adasi, who joined us today, welcome Dr. Awad, who established the closed ICU unit. And a lot of us remember Dr. Ahmed Qamha, Allah yarhamu, peace be on him, who lived his life and dedicated to ICU and died in the medical ICU, Allah yarhamu. Done a lot of work to the medical intensive care unit. Then came Dr. Abdul Salam, who really established the critical care fellowship for medical ICU. And after that, I had the pleasure to continue the journey of my colleagues. The pediatric ICU started in 1982, all with the hospitals, all the ICUs that's open. It was started actually by Dr. Horakiu Zaglul, who's not here today. Spent about 10 years. Then Dr. Najah took over, and he continued really for 30 years training many generations of critical care doctors and continue to inspire the pediatric ICU, followed by Dr. Khalid and Dr. Khalid Al-Laythi, who's currently leading in the pediatric ICU. Neonatal ICU, established in 1974, actually, in Rumeila Hospital as a small unit. And it moved to the Women Hospital in 1988, expanded and continued to expand. And that's, without saying, Dr. Hilal team that really transformed it to a world-class, state-of-the-art critical care unit. And so it's the first ICU that is doing actually international benchmark for Qatar. So it's something we wanted to recognize. Sidra came on board, state-of-the-art center, and we have multiple ICUs, neonate, pediatric, cardiac, ECMO program, fantastic critical care transport program as well, and that's increased the capacity for us as well, for Qatar. So if you look for the time, the population growth, we started with 200,000 in 1980. We have 2 ICU beds. 1 bed per 100,000. That's what we started. Over time, you can see the growth continue, and we are about 2.8 million. The ICU bed did increase, but there is a time here that there is no really increment much. And you can see the gap for the ICU bed. This time was very difficult. This is the time when we see 20 patient ICU waiting in the emergency department. They get intubated, ventilated in the ED, and then they getting either extubated in the ICU. This was the really, really difficult time. I joined around this time, but I can really imagine the pressure that my colleagues were actually when they're running this unit at this time. And this has led to, as well, the MERS coronavirus outbreak in the region 2013. This has really led the critical care people to come together. That was really a change of moment. Initially started with Dr. Abdul Salam, Dr. Abdul Hafid, Dr. Faisal, and Dr. Ahmed Zarour, that they formed the critical care committee. That was the first, actually, was shared by Dr. Abdul Latif, who actually started this with the team. And this group started to bring people together. Instead of working as an isolation, we wanted to unite, we wanted to work more closely together. And this is expanded to have the critical care center network, really that initially started in Hamad Hospital with all those fantastic people in 2014 to try to solve this problem and now expanded more. So it have everybody from all Qatar, mostly from Hamad and Sidra, all these fantastic people work together, and they done so many achievements, really, which is built on what we have delivered previously. So just listing some of them, that is, work that's really been solidifying all the work that have been done over 40 years. We've done a very interesting gap analysis reviewing all the deficiencies of critical care in Qatar. We developed level of care, so that's a standard level of care to speak the same language. The core standard, that was the birth of the SRF ECMO program, so we have a National Severe Respiratory Failure ECMO program we can retrieve from anywhere in Qatar, a mobile ECMO program. Patient flow program that's really cut through walls, and we have a full system to control ICU beds across the country. Qatar Early Warning Sign and Rapid Response Program, working closely with other colleagues with us. Fellowship accreditation. Neonatal Transport Program is one of the finest in the region, that developed by Dr. Hilal team. We also have a fantastic critical care transport program that was done to integrate all the ICU units in the country. And another aeromedical transport program that's capable of doing ECMO transport. We've done several ECMO retrieval and transport with our aeromedical units. The National Sepsis Program, delivery, neurocritical care program, clinical practice guideline that's now standardized across all the ICUs, and a very interesting and national ACPR program. So our time from cardiac arrest to ECMO is less than 55 minutes. So that's all developed by all this great work, team that work together, and very important training and simulation. And some of you already been to all the workshop that were all delivered actually by the team here, some obviously by international faculty, but majority of the courses were developed by the team. So we've seen really an integration of all the units, of all the hospitals working together, from Hamad, Sidra, hopefully Al-Ahli and other, to integrate, and this has given us the birth of this. So here I'm formally announcing the birth of Qatar Critical Care Society, that bringing everybody together. And we will never be able to do that without the work that's been happening over 40 years. It's a great success and celebration that we are celebrating today. This is the Critical Care Network, one of our meeting. Just thanking you all for joining us today. And it's a great pleasure really to share all the work that have been done by these people and 40 years before us to be where are we here today. This is a great pleasure. And I think the next is to invite Claire, and it's the time to recognize the people who really made the difference for the life of our friends and colleagues, father and mother, treating them 40 years ago until now. I'll ask Claire to join us today, and we'll start one by one. Thank you.
This evening's proceedings now brings us to perhaps the most important part of the opening ceremony, the recognition of 13 individuals who've delivered more than was ever asked of them in the pursuance of excellence in critical care provision in Qatar. Firstly, I would like to welcome Dr. Faisal Malmström to join Dr. Ibrahim Fawzi to present the awards this evening. Dr. Faisal is the Director of Surgical Critical Care at HMC, Vice Chair of the Department of Anesthesiology, ICU and Perioperative Medicine, as well as the Deputy Director of the HMC Critical Care Centre. Dr. Malmström is also the Chair of the Hamad General Hospital's Ethics Committee. Our first award goes to a gentleman who needs very little introduction. He served critical care services in Qatar for over 39 years, arriving just after HMC was established by a Emiri decree. Since then, he has dedicated himself to the development of critical care services here. It is fair to say that Dr. Hafiz is the true godfather of critical care services in Qatar, and for that, we are truly grateful. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdul Hafiz to the stage.
I'm very grateful to our staff who gives us the history and gave us such valuable information. Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim and Dr. Fah. Thank you very much.
Our next award goes to the gentleman who has the honour of being the first ever Qatari American Board certified critical care physician, which paved the way for many more Qatari physicians to follow in his footsteps. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammed Al-Mari to the stage. Our next award winner has given nearly 30 years of commitment to paediatric ICU, training generations of ICU clinicians, and has led the development and expansion of the paediatric ECMO program. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Naja Khalil to the stage. Our next award goes to a gentleman who has served HMC as a senior consultant interventional cardiologist for over 23 years. He led the advancement of the modern CCU, as well as pioneer of the established ALS training program in the state of Qatar. His personal contribution to critical care is well known to all. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ghahani to the stage.
Thank you all. Thank you for everybody who stayed with us in the middle of the night to save people. Thank you to all the ambulance people who brought them in. Thank you to every student, every resident, every fellow, every consultant, every nurse, every ambulance person, every technician, every cleaner, every housekeeping. Thank you so, so much for making a difference that Dr. Fawzi has spoken about. Thank you.
Our next award winner has dedicated 30 years of his life as consultant in cardiothoracic surgery in Hamid General Hospital. He was a pioneer of integrating respiratory therapy in critical care. His personal contribution to critical care is well known to all. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Amar Shakuni to the stage. Our next award winner was the founding director of the Trauma Centre at Hamid General Hospital, established the comprehensive trauma programme and achieved significant changes in the way trauma patients are managed at HMC. His personal contribution cannot go unstated, but unfortunately he can't be with us here tonight to collect his award, but we'll make sure he gets it. Thank you. Our next award winner served critical care for 10 years and introduced the closed critical care concept in MICU, as well as the initial establishment of medical intensive care as a discrete unit. His significant personal contribution to modern critical care services in Qatar cannot be understated.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm really very glad to be with you tonight. And I was very happy when I was invited to attend this conference. After 20 years from leaving Qatar, in fact, I left 1999. And if this means something to me, it means that the Qatari appreciate and respect those who serve Qatar, because they love Qatar, and we do as well. في مثل عندنا بيقول اللي ماله أول ماله تالي، والقطريين لهم أول وثاني وثالث كمان، لأنهم شعب طيب وكريم. شكرا جزيلا للجميع.
Our next award winner was an exemplary physician who was committed to caring for his patients in MICU. His commitment to improving the quality of clinical guidelines and protocols transformed care delivered in the unit. Sadly, Dr. Ahmed Kama is no longer with us, but he passed away in the unit that he had worked so tirelessly in to change the lives of his patients. Please join me in welcoming his wife to the stage to receive the award. Our next award winner is widely recognised as that of the godfather of neonatal critical care. He led the transformation of an average ICU to simply a world-class ICU. Under his leadership, several programmes were developed, including the Neonatal Critical Care Transport Programme through partnership working with the National Ambulance Service. He was first to recognise the benefit of using international benchmarking in driving improvement. Tonight, we recognise one of the founding fathers of today's critical care services, Dr. Hilal Arafai. Our next award winner has delivered endless support to critical care and severe respiratory failure ECMO programme development in Qatar. He pioneered the introduction of the mechanical circulatory support programme and set the foundation for heart transplant development countrywide. His personal contribution to critical care services is known to all. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Khalifi to the stage. The transformation of critical care nursing profession in Qatar through the introduction of professional competencies, clinical practice guidelines, training and education. He has led the whole critical care nursing service to be aligned with what is considered international best practice. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Majid Hijja to the stage. Our next award winner is considered by many to be the true engine room behind the establishment of Critical Care Network and the transformation of critical care services in Qatar. His achievements include the introduction of network-wide standardised workforce modelling for critical care clinical staffing and evidence-based simulation to underpin critical care service business expansion across HMC. Please join me in welcoming Mr. David Selwood to the stage. Our final award winner tonight has been a key figure in transforming critical care by establishing the first critical care network, critical care fellowship programme and data registry. It's his foresight that paved the way for the development of the National ECMO programme, handing over the leadership to Dr. Ibrahim in 2012. But he continues to be a crucial member of the network. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Al-Salam Saif to the stage. Thank you very much. Can I ask all the award winners please to return to the stage for photographs? Thank you. Thank you, and that now concludes the opening ceremony. Thank you very much.